Roger, I'm up.
I heard you, John. Thanks. MJ, I see you as well. Looks like we got good morning, everybody. Thanks for your that quick adjustment there. Do I need to promote Christopher to a panelist so that he can answer questions?
I assume that's a question for Black Box.
Yeah, Jackson, do you copy that?
You got to turn off all your.
What was the question, Justin?
Can do you want me to promote Christopher as an attendee to a panelist?
Negative. So I think the only presenters are you, Josh, Vinny, John, and myself.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Josh, I'm going to mute you real quick, bud.
All right, Justin, sorry about that. We had to have Mary Jean sign out and sign back in.
Copy that. Thank you.
Justin, can you please promote Michael Fair?
Yep.
I turned my audio off, so.
Okay, I'm here.
Are you going to be talking at all on this?
Good morning, everyone. We wanted to say welcome. We're going to give this a couple more minutes before we start the presentation, just for a couple more people to come in. So we'll most likely start a couple minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Seek, and I am with Simple Space. I want to thank everyone who was prompt and on time. We're going to give folks another few minutes here before we begin. We intend to get started at about 5 minutes after the hour. Please hang tight for us. We're just going to mute and patiently wait here for a few more minutes to let some folks get signed in, and we'll begin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for your patience. Hi there, Joshua Seek with Simple Space. Thank you, everyone, for logging on. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes, perhaps 3 more. We'll begin our presentation at 5 minutes after the hour. We want to make sure to let folks know that we're going to have a Q&A period at the end of the presentation. Feel free along the way to ask questions. Know that we'll take time to answer them at the end. We appreciate everyone's time this morning, and we look forward to beginning. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Joshua Seek, and I am the founder and a partner in a company called Simple Space. I want to thank everyone for joining. I know we've got a couple of folks that are straggling in, but I want to thank everyone for their time today. Please allow me real quickly to turn this over to Jackson Dalton of Black Box Safety. Jackson, the stage is yours virtually.
Thank you for the introduction, Josh. Good morning. My name is Jackson Dalton. I'm the president of Black Box Safety. We've partnered with Justin and Josh of Simple Space, whom you just met. They're the manufacturers of a rapidly deployable shelter solution. But more importantly, we're honored this morning to host a discussion, the title of which is Decision Points, Emergency Facilities and Surge Capacity. So basically, what do we do when our healthcare facilities, correctional facilities, et cetera, reach surge capacity? Our leader for this topic is Major General Vincent Coglianese, USMC retired. General Coglianese, a recently retired 2-star general with 36 years of faithful service in the Marine Corps, served as commander of 24 Marine Corps bases and installations worldwide, with a market replacement value of $80 billion. In addition, he was responsible for the supervision of 31,000 military and civilian personnel, supporting over 550,000 troops and their families. General Coglianese has experience responding to crisis and disaster in both combat and peacetime environments. We're really happy to have him here this morning, and I would now like to turn the meeting over to Major General Coglianese.
Hey, Jackson, thank you for the kind introduction, and also my congratulations, hat off to all those out there who is facing this crisis that our nation's facing right now. Next couple of slides, I'm just going to give you some thoughts I had, lessons I learned both overseas and even most recently during some hurricanes that we encountered at our installations, that we had to go into a crisis planning, emergency operations type of event. And so hopefully if it gets you maybe a nugget or two out of it. It's a collaborative type of environment. Look forward to your questions at the end. But I'll begin with, I think, a term that's very familiar in the military is called time is your enemy. Time is limited, obviously, and we talk about flash to bang. And I'll give you an example. During Hurricane Florence, we knew the storm was coming. Like most hurricanes, you don't know the exact location. So you're making decisions about evacuations or not to evacuate. One of the decisions we had to make was about pre-positioning high-power crews with their trucks, civilians on our installations. And I'm talking about North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point. Large population of Marine Corps, very important to the Corps and to the nation. Well, in order to do that, we had to contract these forces and put them there. And it was a decision that once we paid for, it was a sunken cost. But we did that. And it turned out to be a very smart decision by our team because we were able to come up quicker than any of the civilian population were restoring power, because virtually every power line was knocked down on our installations. And they repaired transmission lines and substations. And why is that important? Well, it's not only did we have to pre-position the forces there, but we had to provide them billeting. They weren't going to get rooms in a hotel. They had to live on their installations. And I'm going to talk about swing space a little later, but we call it swing space or additional capacity, however you want to term it. But it's important, and we'll get into that a little later. In your planning cycle, it's obvious, but you have to really do the reverse planning timeline. You have to have a series of decision points. Just back one still. Yeah, decision points in that timeline. And so when you're told you have to get this capacity up and running. And then from that point on, you make that critical path, the decisions that you have to have done in order to accomplish that mission, and realizing that there's going to be obstacles along the way. Okay, slide, please. There's no such thing as a perfect plan. I could tell you whether it's the invasion of Iraq or the invasion of Afghanistan, you had a lot of smart people throughout the whole of government, throughout DOD, with a very, very deliberate plan. And you're going to make assumptions, and not all those assumptions are going to be true. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's critical to have a very collaborative plan and all the stakeholders at the table. The Navy built a hospital at Camp Pendleton several years ago, not too many years ago, but it came in under budget. It came in early, best safety record. It received all these awards. I happened to be the commanding general at Camp Pendleton at the time. I was not responsible for that construction. It was our Navy Facilities Command, and we had a great contractor. But people would come by, congressmen, officials, and they had to happen. Why was that so successful? And so, pulling the string, it was about collaboration up front. It was the Navy medicine team that was involved, all the expertise in the medical facilities. It was a design build, had a great contractor, and a very, very collaborative team that made adjustments along the way. And it really showed, because I don't think there's any hospital, whether it's civilian or military built, that comes in early and under budget. But it kind of proved the importance of planning in that team. And you need to build your own strong team with as much expertise you can get on. That's a no-brainer, but sometimes everybody's pulling for those same people. Talk about false assumptions. You're going to have assumptions. You need them when you come into a plan, but you need to check those assumptions, whether it's a plan that's already on the shelf or a plan you're developing now, and you make those assumptions. Some of those assumptions will not be true, and you just need to adjust. But and an example of another example on the storm of an assumption that we made was, we have fuel trucks on base that are driven by commercial contractors, if you will. Defense Logistics Agency actually contracts them. And when the storm hit, the drivers took off. They left. So we had trucks that needed to refuel backup generators, critical backup generators, to hospitals, to command centers. And we didn't have the personnel to do it. So we adjusted, and Marines jumped in those trucks and these civilian trucks and did the refueling. But we assumed that they were going to stay, but they did. Your site survey is really important. And not only where you're going to pick to put the surge capability, think long-term, because at least in the Marine Corps, when we set up temporary facilities, they're never temporary. They become permanent pretty quickly. And so you want to put them in the right spot, thinking it's going to be there a long time. And I would encourage you looking at your geospatial analytics, looking at the floodplains. It might be a great place to put the facilities now, but maybe in another season, it's not a good place to put it. And you'll regret that decision if you really didn't look at it. And you can look at worst case. You also can look at critical infrastructure, usually with your geospatial data, to make that good decision when you're laying additional water, storage, or other critical infrastructure. And then I would say, use a planning process. The military has a great planning process. You can Google it and find it. Each service pretty much has the same process. There's a rapid and deliberate planning process. Let me just stay here for 1 second and talk about the importance of swing space. And so you need to think of not only the facilities you're building, maybe the hospitals, emergency rooms, extra beds, whatever, but think about the personnel that goes along with it. There's building requirements, administrative spaces, maintenance personnel, security personnel. That'll be additional spaces you need if you don't have already available, whether in the local community or close proximity of facilities that you're building. So it might not just be the building itself, capability, but it might be additional spaces for personnel and that you're going to need to operate, maintain, or work in those spaces. Okay, slide. Hey, we learned during Florence that you're competing with not only local, national, but a global markets. And you're competing on all resources, personnel, materials, skilled labor. We had construction folks flown in, came in from Puerto Rico, Texas. It's a limited market. And with what's going on in the nation right now, the skill sets you need might be needed in other places. So it creates an inflated cost. It really doubled our cost because of you basically paying per diem, if you will, for them to come and work, obviously many miles away from home. And North Carolina only has certain capabilities and workforce that was available at the time. But it's all things, like I said, material and equipment and personnel. Okay, slide. Slight preparation could be the long pole in the tent. We're going to provide, I believe at the end of the brief or on the website, a hospital disaster self-assessment tool, which is online, and I think it's a great tool. And there's other great tools and emergency operations centers and FEMA and other organizations that have out there to utilize. But I think this one's pretty new in the sense that it's been updated recently and it's usable. But medical facilities come with special requirements, and I'm probably telling the experts out there, you already know this. It's not just like building a billeting facility. You're going to need obviously fiber connectivity, and your current network might not have the capacity, whether it's routers or Ethernet, or just not close enough to that connectivity that you're going to need additional fiber run to these facilities. When you think about the environmental controls that are so important in medical, blood storage, bio-waste, disease surveillance, morgue or mortuary services. You see that in New York right now. Labs, narcotics storage. These are all special requirements, specially regulated, specially oversights, security. So it's just more complex than normal facilities that you're going to have to either build or increase. And it comes with that expertise you need in the planning process that I talked about. You need to build, obviously, resiliency. We're used to, in the military, especially forward deployed, power going out. But we don't want power to go out in our command centers. We can have power go out in maybe billeting or maintenance facilities, but in these medical facilities, you can't have power going out. So you're going to have that redundancies, whether it's in the generator, shore power, but it needs to be built in, that resiliency, not only in power, but on-site maintenance support. Okay, slide. Take control of the narrative. We've had many different crises, like I said, both in the United States and overseas. And when something's going wrong, when there's a tendency for a lot of people wanting to report on the information. Everybody wants to put the hand up and say they know the answer and tell their boss because their boss is anxious. I would tell you that if you're developing a facility or something that's critical and there's urgency, obviously, in doing that, come up with a means of updating all the stakeholders, not only your boss, but others that are interested. Because if you don't take control of the narrative, somebody else will take control, and then you'll be answering questions all day long, whether it's email, chat, phone, text, about updates. So, one methodology, you provide a morning and evening update. We used to call it senior leader update in the Pentagon at the highest level to the secretary. or you could provide a weekly update. But, you know, getting back to your plan, those milestones and decision points, or you can make the bubble chart, red, green, yellow type of stuff. But you need to provide an update to kind of get the people off your back so you can accomplish the task at hand. And once you got it, and once they realize you're going to provide it, it really is saves you a lot of time. Okay, slide. This is probably my favorite slide. Establish a battle rhythm with the stakeholders. If you're working at the state or local level or municipality or city, the stakeholders are from FEMA to the emergency operations centers to local communities to the mayors to the police. There's going to be a series during a crisis, as you know, of meetings, virtual meetings, real meetings, voice meetings, and you need to have that battle rhythm. You need how you're going to feed the information to your boss at what time you're going to have your meetings. And as soon as you put, you know, it'll be adjusted, but you need to get it up there and let people know when you're holding those meetings so they can either dial in or come and listen and participate, because it's a collaborative event. Once you're done the plan will be adjusted, and you need that collaboration throughout the plan. So it's pretty important. Okay, slide. Now this is the checklist I talked about, the hospital disaster preparedness self-assessment tool. It's really a lot of things that I've kind of mentioned in the slides, but it's a great checklist. It'll remind you of something maybe you're missing as you're going forward and planning these important facilities. It's not the end all, but it's definitely a good starting point, good piece of gear as you're doing your plan, that you collect this information, just like you're doing your geospatial analytics, and help you in developing that plan. So you'll see that at the end. Okay. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh, I believe. Next slide.
Yes, sir, Vinny. Thank you very much. So first of all, as General Coglianese mentioned, at the end of the presentation, the good folks from Black Box Safety will share with you all three of these documents. Document number one being this presentation, the decision points presentation. Document number two being the hospital disaster preparedness self-assessment tool. It is quite thorough, as Vinny said. It may not be the place, it may not be the end all be all, but it is a wonderful beginning point. And then the last document is this PDF graphic, and it's actually slightly different than this. It's got space for notes, etc. But we hope you'll print it out. We hope you'll share it with folks, because it's a great visual representation of where you have to begin the process. So my name is Joshua Seek, and I am the founder and a partner in a company called Simple Space. I want to first of all thank General Coglianese. I also want to thank his brother John, who is on the phone and boasts, I think, 25 plus years of government and military planning as an intelligence officer, and who has worked at an interagency level, both in planning and operations. John was very helpful in helping us form this presentation. So just real quick about Simple Space. We aren't here to sell you anything today. That isn't our goal. Our goal is to help anyone who might be in attendance that has questions about what do I do next. The plan that we had isn't exactly the plan that we now need. We want to help you think through the physical structural component of that. So Justin, if you want to bump it forward a slide. This is what Simple Space does. Simple Space is quite simply a rapidly deployable structure company. We have a whole series of things which make what we do proprietary. However, there are a number of available modular solutions. We aren't the only folks, and we think that this current problem is large enough that there are going to be quite a few solutions needed. So in the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I suppose, we've been fielding questions from municipalities, healthcare organizations, all kinds of different folks about their needs. And what we can say unequivocally is that while everyone is facing challenges, their challenges are unique. And so rather than talk specifically about this hospital and, you know, this 2-story deployment with 16 isolated rooms in it, we want to talk more about what it is that we need to consider, right? So we're all fighting the same battle, but the requirements of virtually every location are going to be different. And so we want to make sure that you consider all of the items that you're going to need to support, overcome, or endure at each of your considered sites. Make sure the sites that you select, notice that I say plural sites. We think it's important that you have multiple plans. Make sure that they allow for success, right? So in consideration, support, overcome, and endure. How can you support a location? What will you have to overcome to use that location? And what will you have to endure because you chose it? With all of that said, I'd like to introduce everybody to my partner, Justin White. Justin has 20+ years of extensive building, rigging, fabrication, and contracting experience. He is a rapidly deployable genius, in my opinion. And he just wants to talk for a little bit about overflow space and what you might consider. So Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Josh. I'd like to thank Jackson Dalton from Black Box Safety and his team for supporting us here. I'd like to thank the General and John Coglianese and everyone on my team. Thank you so much for attending. So as Josh and the General pointed out, there is a lot to consider here. And I'm not going to go too deep, but what I want to do is kind of look at some of the options when we talk about structures that we might have available. And what I'm going to kind of go through and what you can see here are options, and you may need all these, you may only need one of them, you may need none of them. But we have to consider, as the General pointed out, to look at almost every option and to really take a look at our site. And the tools that we're going to provide will really help that. So one of the things that seems to be gaining lots of traction in several parts of the country and the world is using existing spaces. Now, those could be hotels, that could be gymnasiums, that could be other bulk spaces such as warehouses and things. However, those could be taken up rather quickly, or they may be utilized for other things as the economy opens up a little more, things may change and your spaces may change. So you might need something such as a single membrane tent or something in the top right photos you see here. Now, the difficulties with those is a lot of times a temporary tent or temporary structure such as these single membrane tents may not have a floor. You may not have doors. You may or may not have windows. So when we talk about using ventilators and negative space, you know, that's one option that may or may not work for you, but it may be the quickest option. Moving past that, we can look at some of a more high-grade tent or a dual membrane tent, something that might have some solid panel walls of some sorts. There's been a lot of adaptations by large staging companies on the East and West Coast to take advantage of using what would normally be for a rock concert for potentially for some type of overflow space. But what these might have is we actually might have a raised or solid panel floor. Physical segregation might be capable. But again, sometimes these lack maybe permanent lighting. A lot of times the cost for HVAC and other systems to go into these spaces can rise rather quickly. And if you do need negative air pressure in one of these facilities, again, that can be a challenge or not even available at all. Also, the more systems you add on, and I'll get to this in a little bit, potentially the more work and contractors you're going to need. So now logistics and planning now become something else always to consider. Moving from that, and Josh showed you in the last slide, some of the simple space buildings, we're looking at more of a rapidly deployable modular structure. In the pictures you see here at the bottom, we have buildings that are engineered and structure rated. Now, in the other two structures I talked about, wind, rain, a lot of weather elements can wreak havoc. A modular structure can have built-in HVAC. In our structures, we can do negative airflow. We have weather-tight capability. If they, as the general mentioned, if you have to leave these facilities in place longer than you originally estimated, this is something that would allow you to do that. So there's also, because of the walls and the way we can segregate these spaces, is we can have a greater density capability. So the most important thing is you need to have plans and identified resources for any and all of these options that make sense for your jurisdiction. So, you're really going to have to put the feelers out. We will provide information if you have questions in regards to some of the facilities we went through. The next thing I want to talk about is when we talk about overflow systems. So there are many to consider. The general went through several, okay? And there are many to consider, so we're going to put some of that information for you here at the end. One of the biggest things that we partner with New Tech here in Las Vegas, and they help us with a lot of power needs, which become very critical, as the general mentioned. That can be shore power, that can be generator power, that can be backup power, but you want to have good proprietary systems that aren't going to fail and that are going to meet your needs. So, that's something very critical. Also, as things change on a daily basis and the Internet of Things becomes so popular in our spaces, and how very critical it is to passing information along, data and fiber connections in these facilities becomes extremely critical for monitoring and passing of information. So we want to make sure that we also look at that almost just as critical as some of the other safety systems. And, another thing to consider is, like I mentioned before, negative air pressure and the systems that go into that. And, there's only one structure that you can really take advantage of that unless you have individually sealed units. And if you're doing individually sealed units inside of a bigger unit, now you have two facilities. If you can eliminate that down to one with a modular structure, it can help solve that problem. So again, ask yourself, what do I need? What are my options? And what makes sense to me? So there are lots of questions to answer and to look at. I highly recommend you looking at the tools we're going to provide at the end. That's what I have. Josh, I'd like to send this back to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much. So I want to highlight the single most important thing for folks that are attending this webinar, that are trying to process their own criticalities in their own jurisdictions. Let's revert back to what the general said, that there is no perfect plan. And then let's also acknowledge that depending on where you are and what you're facing, you may need all or none of the overflow spaces that Justin just shared with you. We want to strongly encourage you to plan for what seems reasonable in the current environment. Take the time to plan. Understand, if time is your enemy, right? Do not perfect your plan, but make sure that it allows for fluidity, and understand you're not going to be the only jurisdiction that's seeking structure. You will have time to adjust your plan. You will have time to refine your plan, but it is critical that you have it and that you set it in motion with an understanding of your lead times, right? So I want to thank everyone for attending. We are very happy to answer questions here in just a minute, but I want to turn it over to our great and gracious host, Jackson Dalton, and the good people of Black Box Safety. Jackson, thank you so much for allowing the general and all of us to come together here. If there are any questions that we can answer, we will happily hang tight here and answer.
Hey guys, this is Jackson Dalton with Black Box Safety. We were happy to host this meeting. We think that it's important information, and we're just here to help. We want to help save lives. And so in that vein, we have built a landing page on our website, blackboxsafety.com/emergency-shelters. And on that page, you will find the link to the webinar that we were just on. You'll be able to download the presentation, Decision Points, Emergency Facilities, and Surge Capacity, which is in a PDF. In that PDF, you'll find the infographic that will help you and your team navigate these decision points that you're facing. We also have published on that landing page the Hospital Disaster Preparedness Self-Assessment Tool, as well as some information on how to contact us to help design a overflow solution for a rapidly deployable shelter. So that's all I have. Go to the website. All the resources you need are going to be there, and we'll help you out. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Simple Space and Vincent Coglianese to answer any questions the audience might have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackson. I want to let everyone know, if you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, I don't know how familiar folks are with using Zoom. Certainly, it seems like we're all getting very familiar with it recently. You'll note that there's a Q&A feature, and if you all would kindly submit your questions there, the value of that will be that we can then share those questions with others at a later moment. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm trying to get, apologies guys, I'm trying to get to the question to see it so that I can answer it.
It looks like we do have one question that just came in, and that says, do you anticipate cooperation from local, state, and federal agencies in your deployments? Jackson has answered this in Black Box Safety with an initial comment, and we can elaborate if necessary, but his response is, we have been hosting daily discussions with city council and state government agencies. Do any of our panelists have any comments on or additional information that we would need to provide?
I don't have any related to that. I mean, you know, we structurally and from a material standpoint, we of course, you know, meet all of the appropriate requirements for deployment. I think really the situation that we're about to face is going to be a situation that becomes about bandwidth and capacity. And we think that we will likely, you know, see folks really scrambling to just try and source the goods that they need to respond. And that's really one of the main reasons that we asked General Coglianese here today, was to try and help folks think through timing and response and beginning to act.
And Josh, Josh, if I can jump in. So, you know, when we were on the West Coast, we did a lot of DISCA, Defense and Support Civilian Authorities planning with cities like San Francisco that has a very robust team working with California. California Fire, as an example, we work mutual aid agreements and things like that. In this kind of an environment, it's an ecosystem of everybody's kind of having the same problem. And it's decisions and a lot of time requirements are in a very collaborative manner. Whether it's number of hospitals, in the local area, what hospital is going to do what, who's going to, their capacity. So it's a very dynamic environment, and everybody wants to cooperate. Nobody wants to not cooperate, but it's usually about relationships that you currently have. And it kind of goes back to that collaboration, that battle rhythm, making sure you have personnel from your organization either embedded as a liaison with the other, because you'll be shooting on each other's targets because they're getting back to competing for resources, even if it's a couple towns down or a county or another state nearby. So I think everybody wants to cooperate, but it's easier said than done. If you just watch New York City and the governor in New York having a lot of issues trying to coordinate between hospitals. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, General Coglianese. Doton Bear has asked a question about lead time to get these up with full clearance from the VA. So I'm going to spend a moment and talk about specifically about simple space, bandwidth, capacity, and lead time. We have the ability to respond right now within 28 days anywhere in the United States from the time that an order is placed to the time that we show up to deploy it. The methodologies which Justin and I have lived with and perfected over the years really are all about being rapidly deployable, and so we really spend some time focusing on that. With regard to how long it takes to set something up, it really depends on how large it is. But these are rapidly deployable structures. If we were talking about something in the, let's say, 8 to 16 room range, we would anticipate that the simple space component of that deployment would take somewhere in the range of probably 5 days on site, assuming the site had been prepared. I want to turn this over, though, to Jackson and the Black Box team, because I'm really avoiding the VA component of this. And Jackson, of course, and Black Box are VA contractors, and so he can speak to that a little bit. Jackson, go ahead.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so our relation is that Black Box Safety is a government contractor, and we primarily serve Department of Veterans Affairs, healthcare system, Department of Corrections, police and fire. That's all we do is establish government contract vehicles and provide them the goods and services that they need to save lives and minimize risk. And so we're currently in a position to start creating contracts with these government agencies to provide rapidly deployable shelters. And our relationship with Simple Space is such that we have complete confidence that they're going to be able to deliver these rapidly deployable shelter solutions faster than anyone else in the market. And so we have the relationships with the local, state, and federal government, and we are connecting Josh and Justin and their team with these government agencies to get these shelters implemented as quickly as possible. So I don't know if that answers people's questions regarding what the contracts would look like, but I did see another question regarding what capabilities need to exist in place. Can these systems be fully autonomous? In other words, can they support on their own utilities and power? Or do they need to rely on tapping into existing infrastructure? And then there was another question about, what logistics, for example, permitting and site preparation need to be in place before one of these shelters arrive. And I think Justin and Josh would be in the best position to field those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna answer those in reverse of presentation. So, and I'm going to let Justin answer the second part because that's his bailiwick. So what should we be looking to have in place, whether permitting or anything else logistically in preparing to incorporate one of your structures or facilities? This really goes back all the way back to the planning and is a great question, right? I think General Coglianese mentioned how important establishing those stakeholders were in process. And one of the stakeholders that must be involved with any planning that you do is your authority having jurisdiction for buildings. I cannot stress this enough. You must hold hands with this person. Well, virtually hold hands with this person given COVID. This is someone or a department or a stakeholder that is critical to each and everything that you do. And you know, as General Coglianese just mentioned before, we've got to think through, you know, the drastic times and the drastic measures. So permitting, these can deploy as anything from temporary to permanent. So there are a varying number of permits which could be applicable depending on use and dwell time. We think that what's really important is that folks think through that site. It needs to be level. They need to think through either available services or how they're going to provide those services, keeping in mind that they likely need to be redundant if there are no services available. And you know, from there, you know, the way that Simple Space deploys is effectively there will be a project manager at the time that a project becomes real that lives with that project all the way through its execution. There's one more person called a project lead. Those two people, along with some very basic tools and equipment, show up to a job site along with a local contractor and the necessary local equipment and essentially build the job. So in preparing to incorporate, how do you plan? You know, you think through what the use of the building is, you communicate it to us clearly, you think through what the systems are that are required. You know, we talk through what that means in terms of specification in our world, and then we begin to act. General Coglianese is sharing a comment here that I want to share, which is that temporary facilities are often much easier to permit, and he's absolutely right about that. So Simple Space has the ability, for instance, in Clark County, Nevada, which is our home, to deploy a building, a permitted structure for up to 6 months on a temporary basis. That is by far the most rapid way to do it. I want to turn it over now to Justin White, who's going to talk about capabilities for autonomy if there aren't services available. So Justin, if you want to hop in, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I know that we've covered a lot here, and you know, in regards to the question about, you know, in an area without utilities, you know, let me take 2 seconds to think about that too. What existing utilities may be there when you do your initial site survey may change. Okay, and I think that's something that we also have to consider. But let's take advantage of and think of a space that has nothing for us. And where do we start? Well, in regards to power, our focus right now is on using gasoline or diesel power generators. So, you know, if that has to be on site, there needs to be someone who's you know, able to service and run that equipment. There may need to be a backup equipment as well for that. So not just 1 generator, but 2 generators. I think it's very critical that now that we're bringing a fuel source in, we have to have some type of fire protections and fire planning systems in place. We work with a company called Statewide Fire Protection here in Las Vegas. They're also based out of California. But, you know, in regards to your considering what that may be, you know, the power requirements are going to be very critical. We, like I said earlier, we partner with and have experience with doing large power layouts, and you never want to try to downgrade. You always want to overgrade your power, because you never know how quickly you may need to expand. And if you have If you've thought of that prior, you may be in a lot better place. So just just dropping a generator doesn't necessarily mean it's going to distribute power to where you need it. So with the power, also would need to make sure that either that client or vendor or partner you're with, for instance, we have distribution systems built into our structures so that the power run becomes direct right to our boxes, and then those boxes can piggyback or link together so that we don't have a large mess of cable and things, and also something that would slow us down to do tons of power distribution. But that also kind of ties into HVAC as well, also a power system. You also have to have someone, as the general pointed out, people to maintain these systems when they go out. You may be able to lose in one space, but as far as those very critical systems, the critical loads, when it comes to ventilators and lighting and things like that in these facilities, that's the last thing that we do want to lose. Pardon me. In regards to water, now if there is no systems in place, well, like what are the needs? And this goes back, as Josh mentioned, we really need to look at what are our needs? How are our needs going to change? Well, are those needs in regards to sewage? Are they into potable water? Can we tie into, can water be delivered? Who's going to deliver the water? Where are we going to store it? If that's the case, there are a lot of options. There are bladders available. There are tanks available. There are services available. I'm not a huge fan of seeing giant pallets of water bottles, but that may be the only option you have. But that's a finite resource. A whole bunch of water bottles delivered on a pallet. Those disappear rather quickly. You may need a plan to go beyond that, where water is used for hand washing, which is done multiple times a day. And so in our facilities, for instance, we can put a sink or something like that in a nurse's station area, so someone can wash their hands prior to helping deliver service, and maybe potentially when they leave. So when they go to the next place and they change out PPE and they wash their hands, those things are available.
Thank you, Justin. That's perfectly said. So we're nearing the end of an hour, and I want to be respectful of that. There was a question which I answered in writing, and I think everyone probably saw it, but I'll just state it real quickly, and that is, are these available for sale? Will Simple Space sell them beyond the borders of the United States? And the answer to that is yes, we have. We're willing to broker projects just about anywhere in the world. There is another question about who provides ongoing maintenance service personnel, and is that included in quotes to stakeholders? So that is a layer of an onion. It's a very good question. So the answer is that Simple Space can facilitate, or black box safety using Simple Space can facilitate ongoing maintenance service personnel related to the physical structure, right? And the systems which Simple includes. That is not included in the core quote. We quite honestly are getting phone calls from people right now who are not even thinking that far in advance. We're getting calls from people who are trying to understand how to shelter in place substantial homeless populations, and how to incorporate parking lots, and can we build on gravel, and what does it look like on a lawn, and how much of a slope. So yes, absolutely, that's something that Simple can provide. Right now, I think that it is a secondary function, and quite honestly, in most cases, will be something that's locally contracted. I hope that's answered the question. The bottom line is it can be worked out. If there are no other questions, I would like to thank everyone for their time, and I'd like to turn it over to Jackson Dalton. And
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your patience. That was a solid meeting. And just to reiterate, all the resources that we discussed this morning are available on our website, blackboxsafety.com/emergency-shelters. And we look forward to serving you. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much, Jackson. The last thing I'd like to say is the recording that you were listening to today will also be posted in WAV video form for download and available on the net under a URL. We'll be posting that on the Black Box Safety website rather quickly. Thank you.
Thank you.